What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Journey to You. I'm Courtney, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about my experience as an idealist. Now, first things first, as usual, I'm going to do my best to define a couple of terms that I feel are important for this topic. So first and foremost, I want to touch on metacognition. Now, I think a lot. I spend a lot of time with my thoughts and in my head, and one of my favorite things in life is when the concepts that I think about or the theories that I think of actually come to life. And when I'm able to find pieces of writing, or if I'm able to connect with someone that knows something about something that I've thought of but I haven't actually spoken to many people about, it's always really fun for me. An example of this happening was in my very first class in grad school. I learned about metacognition in that class. So the prefix in the word metacognition is meta, and that means on top of. So the concept of metacognition is thinking about one's thoughts. So not only thinking about your thoughts, but also understanding your thought processes. And I just think it's so cool. So of course, that's something that I take part in often, but it's also an idea that I've thought about just outside of myself, like the habit of thinking about your thoughts, thinking about how you think. So yes, back in my first class at grad school, I learned about metacognition and I was like, yes, this is something that I've thought about before. So I was really happy to finally have a term and like a formal concept behind stuff that I had just been thinking about in my free time. So metacognition is important because after I received some negative feedback about being so-called too idealistic, as I typically do, I sat with myself and I thought about why I like to think about things in an idealistic way. So metacognition is the reason that I arrived at the conclusion that I am an idealist. And honestly, it's not such a bad thing. I think that a lot of people like to run with the fact that they're realists, which is great. I mean, to each their own. But in my experience, being an idealist isn't a horrible thing, just as long as we do a couple of things that we'll talk about later. So before we get going, I'm going to define idealism. So if you straight up Google idealism, chances are you'll get a very broad description because in philosophy, it's described as a system of thinking, meaning that there are likely many parts to it. However, the baseline definition of idealism within philosophy is that objects of knowledge are dependent on the activity of the mind. So for example, the existence of anything that I can see or hold is largely informed by my understanding of it. So my mic, for instance. So yes, my mic is present. It's a material object, but a large part of idealism is the thoughts and the understanding that allow me to acknowledge what this mic is, its function, and so on. So it's not just seeing the world as a bunch of material objects, it's attributing meaning to them. It's the idea that things don't just exist because they exist because of the way that we think about their existence. So that's idealism in terms of metaphysics. On the other hand, we have the concept of idealism that suggests that people are after a perfect vision of the world. So the definitions of those concepts are important because I want you guys to see the steps in my thought process. So based off of that definition, I feel like a lot of people blow idealists off because they don't feel like we are realistic. However, I feel like by the end of this video, I'll have done a great job of advocating for myself and my fellow idealists. So we're going to start. I don't want to use the term negative, so we're going to call them the disadvantages of being an idealist. So of course, being an idealist means that we are after some form of perfection. And I feel like a lot of people who might identify as realists have a hard time understanding where we're coming from because a lot of what we experience or a lot of what we might be after isn't rooted in something that we can feel and touch, at least in the beginning. So if you can put yourself in the shoes of an idealistic person after the perfect version of something, it could be anything. What comes with that is spending a lot of time and energy having to craft this idea in your mind and then having to explain it to others and also defend it. And because sometimes it's not rooted in something that's material, it can be exhausting because I think society puts a lot more respect on things that we can touch and feel and manipulate. And it makes sense. It's tough to see any progress if it's not rooted in something that we can touch and feel. We've spoken about this already, but in terms of relationships, I'm sure you guys can tell that being an idealist can be very detrimental. So this happened for me when I was in several relationships, not only romantic, guys. This goes for familial relationships, it goes for friendships, it goes for relationships with colleagues, and with romantic partners, right? So you might meet someone and they'll exhibit very positive qualities, ones that give you the impression that you guys will mesh well. Things fall off for whatever reason, and you're stuck with that vision that you had in your mind. So the beginning is important because you've already experienced the most perfect vision of your relationship with that person. And without having had that experience, it's a lot easier to walk away from something when it's unhealthy. But once you've had that experience as an idealist, it's hard to break away because you feel like you're not asking for too much. You're not asking for something that the person hasn't exhibited in the past. You're not asking for something that's super far-fetched and it didn't just come out of thin air. I think people that approach life with an idealistic perspective struggle where potential is concerned because of the nice and airy picture that they have in their heads. And it can make life difficult because it prevents you from seeing red flags and acting on them. So if you follow me on Twitter, you know this already, but red flags mean stop. They don't mean recalibrate or compromise. And idealistic people who don't have a lot of life experience can get caught up easily because there's way more emphasis on the perfect vision that's in their minds and less emphasis on the reality and what they're experiencing in the moment. So as I mentioned in the beginning, being an idealist is not necessarily a terrible thing. I feel like a lot of idealistic people are fun-loving, and that's a great quality to have, especially in a world that wants us a little bit hardened. I encourage everybody to stay as soft and open as possible because I feel like humanity really needs that. So that takes me to my next point. So seeing the beauty in everything and everyone is awesome. On the other hand, when it comes to decision making, idealists need to stay grounded. And this goes for myself included. I found that I tried to turn my idealism off. And that's because I was around some people who claimed they were realists when in reality, they were actually very cynical and I think projecting their own fear onto me. And that hasn't been my experience with all people who label themselves realists, but it was my experience with people who I held in high regard. Therefore, it had a large impact on me. So Knowledge for Men tells us that to stay grounded means that you have the ability to stay calm and connect to the core of who you are in the face of uncertainty. It means that you aren't controlled by the chaos externally, but rather your values, purpose, and the vision you have predetermined of your life. That sounds like bliss to me. Unfortunately, people often associate idealistic people with being naive, and I don't think that's the case. I just think it's important for people who identify as idealists to stay grounded and also to practice a lot of detachment, because the more that we stay within our body and use our own moral compass and possibly our intuition to guide us, we'll end up making decisions from a healthier place, and that will lead us towards our goals. I think shutting down in the name of realism just created more inner conflict for me, you guys. I've talked about this in so many different contexts, but at the end of the day, whenever my vibration goes down or whenever I just don't feel like myself, I know that I'm not living authentically. So I've learned that I can definitely be idealistic. I just have to practice those things that I mentioned. So that brings me to my next point. And leading up to my birthday this year, with the intent to live more authentically, I told myself that I need to get back to dreaming. Growing up, my imagination was out of this world. And as I got older, I think I got shut down a lot, and so I stopped thinking very big, which sounds really sad, you guys, but it's okay. I feel like I've lived so many lives in my little 26 years on earth. It's been a lot, but it's okay. I'm learning, and as I've mentioned before, there's always a silver lining, so it's not to worry. It's so crazy because on my birthday, in one of the birthday wishes that I received, the person said to me that they wish for me everything that I have dreamed of, even the things that I haven't conceived yet. And that just hit me right in my feelings because not only had I been telling myself to open up more and to just start thinking big again, it was just, it was so timely, after I had that conversation with myself. I think envisioning things and using our imagination is so important, and I need people to know that anything you can conceive is possible. I probably sound so mystic, you guys, but this is just on my heart and I had to share. So the way that I think about it is everything that we dream of now, everything that we can think about is rooted in other experiences that we've had. I feel like sometimes people expect you to stop dreaming when you get to a certain point, but it's no, there's always more. And as long as you're not doing it from a place of greed, then dream bigger, dream everything. And I know for myself, my idealism got me out of the toughest times. If it was not for my imagination and allowing myself to think bigger than what I was experiencing, I wouldn't be here recording this video. While my reality now was not my reality at the time, I was brave enough to think outside of the box that I was in. And that was enough for me to get the wheels moving and to start doing my research and figure out how I was going to make my dream my reality. There are a lot of things that I would have done differently if I knew. And so you have to give yourself that space to like think bigger than what you might be experiencing now. And again, I think I said this right in my first episode, but Google is my best friend, because even if I don't know how to get there might be other people who have gotten there or people who have done something similar. So literally get onto Google, search whatever it is you have to search, and things will come together. I really feel like it starts with our vision and our courage to dream. And of course, I take full accountability for every stage of my life, right? But inside of that is compassion, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think it's important to show our past selves grace. High school me was emotionally detached, but she was hilarious. Like, she had so much energy, and I love her for that. And then of course, codependent me was sad, she was broken, but it's her resilience and her courage that got me to where I am now. And I wouldn't be able to tell my story authentically or with honesty if I didn't acknowledge those parts of me. So my last tip for idealists is to say yes more. A lot of times our circumstances may not look like the ones that we envision for ourselves, but keeping an open mind and just being open to life in general, sometimes things work out better than we might have expected. And honestly, even if they don't work out, at least we have more lessons that we can pull from later on in life. And those things will help us to make more informed decisions as we go throughout life. And on that note, I have to share something with you guys that my best friend shared with me recently. It makes me a little bit emotional. I'm sure that's no surprise to you guys now, but the message is that to anybody that might be starting over in life, and this could be in any capacity, while you're starting over, know that you're not starting from scratch. So while things might not have worked out in the past, there's no reason to stop dreaming. It's that will to keep going that will allow you to open up to better fitting circumstances. We have to keep going because that's also the only way that we're going to get to implement the things that we've learned, you know? And we don't want to go through these very negative experiences in vain. And just from my own experience, I feel so much better being able to use that stuff to inform my new reality as opposed to just sitting there and dwelling in the disappointment. And remember that many of us are headed to places that we've never been before, that our circles have never been before. So don't let anybody's fear stop you from dreaming or remaining open to new experiences. So everyone, let's sum it up. I want you to stay grounded. I want you to practice detachment. I want you to stay open, and I want you to keep dreaming. And this goes for anything in life. For instance, relationships. If I have only experienced negative relationships, I might feel embarrassed to dream about something that I've never experienced before because it doesn't seem realistic. But let me tell you, it's worth it, okay? That's where courage comes in. Courage to stay true to yourself and courage to continue dreaming even if it feels childlike and even if the people around you don't have the confidence to keep dreaming. So that's it for this episode, you guys. You know, this has been such a fulfilling journey and I feel so blessed to have the support of everybody who watched this summer. I really, really appreciate it. I know I say it almost all of the time, but just know that I mean it. And I have Hove lyrics coming to mind right now. Izzo is one of my favorite songs, and in it, he says, Hove did that, so hopefully you won't have to go through that. And on that note, I just hope that some of my experiences can either prevent people from going through the same things or just provide that motivation to keep going. Of course, I'm not going very far. I do have my main channel. If you're into skincare and beauty content, you can definitely catch me there. I do hope to return to Journey to You sometime in the future, but for now, I'm heading back to school and things like that. And I'm wishing everyone a very happy and healthy end of 2021. I know this is just a crazy time, but I pray we'll be outside safely sooner than later. Anyways, guys, that's it. Thank you so much. Bye.